There are moments when life stops. Not because the world has come to a halt, but because we have lost our way. We walk, we move forward, we achieve goals, and yet, something feels empty. It's as if we're playing a role in a play we didn't write. Have you ever wondered if you're truly living your life or just surviving one that was imposed on you? These questions don't arise by chance. They are the whisper of an inner truth that has waited years to be heard. Carl Jung, the great psychologist of the soul, said that life really begins when you find yourself. But what does that mean? It's not about discovering something new, but remembering something essential that you had forgotten: who you are. From childhood, we adopt masks. Jung called them the persona, borrowed roles, identities, ways to fit into the world. We become obedient children, exemplary students, functional adults. We learn which parts of ourselves are acceptable and which we must hide. Slowly, we stop showing ourselves and start performing. And though these masks help us survive, over time, they also suffocate us. The emptiness we feel is not weakness or failure. It's a sign, a crack, inviting us to look within. That discomfort, that quiet unease when everything seems fine but something doesn't add up, is the beginning of the real journey. A journey not outward, but inward. This video isn't a recipe or a magic formula. It's an invitation to pause, to look at your reflection without filters, to ask yourself, am I living as who I truly am? Because as painful as it may be to admit, often the life we lead is not the life we want. It's the life we thought we were supposed to have. And yet right there in that tension between who we are and who we pretend to be, lies the most powerful opportunity of all, to find ourselves. Perhaps a tired gaze, a forced smile, or maybe a forgotten spark still alive, because beneath all those layers imposed by family, culture and expectations, your truth still beats, sometimes faint, almost imperceptible, but real. Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming who we truly are, and that path begins the moment we dare to question, why do I do what I do? Who am I trying to please? How much of who I am was chosen by me? And how much was inherited unconsciously? This isn't about rejecting our past, but redefining it, seeing clearly which parts of our lives were built with love and authenticity, and which simply obeyed fear or the need for approval. Because yes, we often accept jobs, partners, or lifestyles, not because they make us happy, but because they follow a social script we learn to obey. But here's the good news. You can always return to yourself, no matter how many years have passed, no matter how far you feel you've strayed. The journey back to your center begins with a single decision: to stop running from yourself. That return, of course, isn't comfortable. It means facing what you've avoided, your doubts, your sadness, your buried anger. It means looking your shadow in the eye, as Jung called it, and discovering that within it lie essential pieces of your being, ignored desires, dormant talents, unhealed wounds. The shadow isn't your enemy, it's your forgotten self. And when you acknowledge it without judgment, when you sit with it and listen, something begins to shift. Space opens for something new, more honest, more profound. In that moment, something ignites. Life. Your life starts to take on new color, because you're no longer living to fit in, but to be. And that, though it may seem small, is the greatest act of freedom. The freedom to be yourself isn't a destination reached overnight. It's a slow, sometimes painful, but deeply transformative process. It shows up in everyday choices, when you say what you truly think, when you allow yourself to feel without censorship, when you dare to walk a different path, even if it disappoints those who expected another version of you. And this is where many people stop, because breaking the mold hurts. Questioning your own story takes courage. Relationships may fray when you choose honesty. You may no longer fit in where you once did, but if you don't take that step, you risk living a life that isn't yours. We often fear authenticity will cost us love, opportunities, or recognition. But what we truly lose when we betray ourselves is inner peace. That voice silenced each time we say yes, when we meant no. That energy drained by upholding an image that doesn't reflect us. Finding yourself means reclaiming that voice, learning to say, "This is me." This is not from arrogance, but clarity, from a self-love that seeks not to impose but to flourish. Jung said the shadow holds not just what we reject, but what we fear might shine too brightly. We often hide our gifts, our sensitivity, our passions, afraid of being misunderstood. But a repressed life isn't living, it's decoration. When you begin to honor what's within you, no embellishments, no apologies, everything changes. Life stops being a series of compromises and becomes an act of expression. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need the willingness to walk with yourself, even when the path is uncertain. Because finding yourself doesn't mean having all the answers. It simply means no longer hiding. When we stop hiding, we realize something powerful. We're not broken, just fragmented. We left parts of ourselves in the past, buried under wounds, judgments, or disappointments. Now little by little we gather those pieces. The sadness we weren't allowed to feel, the art we stopped creating, the words we never spoke. They're still there, waiting for our permission to exist. This journey to oneself isn't linear. There are steps forward and backward, days of light and nights of darkness. Sometimes we think we've fully awakened, only to realize we're still asleep in other ways. And that's okay. Individuation isn't a destination. It's a constant pulse between who we've been and who we're willing to become. And it's on this path that we discover purpose. Not the kind sold in motivational quotes, but an intimate one. To live with intention, to act with awareness, to love from truth, work with meaning, and build relationships based not on need, but authenticity. As we align with who we are, our choices shift. What once seemed urgent no longer is. What felt safe now feels like a cage, and what seemed foolish starts to make sense. Changing career, traveling without a map, ending a relationship that no longer resonates, starting a project no one understands but you feel called to. These acts of honesty with yourself create a life that doesn't just look good from the outside, it feels right from within. Because that's what changes everything. No longer living for appearances, but for coherence. The visible transforms when the invisible is in order, and there, right there, is where life truly begins. Living from inner alignment isn't easy in a world that rewards image and punishes difference. But when you start walking your own path, something rearranges inside. You no longer need as much external validation. You realize the most important applause doesn't come from the crowd, but your own conscience. And no, this doesn't make you selfish. It makes you present. Because a person at peace with themselves is more capable of loving without fear, giving without emptiness, and seeing others without judgment. When you find yourself, you stop demanding others fill your voids, and there, relationships blossom, real, deep, free of shared math. This new way of living also transforms your relationship with failure. It's no longer a shame, but part of the process. You don't need to always win, because the real victory is not betraying yourself. You lose the fear of starting over, because now you begin from a truer place. And here a new gift emerges: compassion for yourself, for all you've endured to get here, and for others. You understand everyone is in some way struggling to find themselves, and that understanding makes you more human, more empathetic, more. Life stops being a race and becomes a dance with your light and shadows, with your dreams and limits, and you realize you don't need to be perfect to be whole. Your worth isn't in what you achieve, but in what you allow yourself to be. From this point on, every decision carries new weight. It's no longer about meeting expectations, but honoring your truth, being where your soul breathes, saying yes with your heart and no without guilt. Because when you find yourself, it doesn't just change how you live, it changes how you exist. And in that more honest existence, a subtle but profound shift occurs. You realize true fulfillment isn't in having more, but in being more. More you, more present, more aware. You no longer seek guarantees from life, because you've become your own certainty. You stop chasing what doesn't resonate. You no longer need to imitate or conform. And though the path isn't always easy, you feel more alive than ever. Because even pain, when faced with truth, becomes a seed of growth. You learn to inhabit silence, to value stillness, to look at life without anxiety, knowing each phase holds its own wisdom. You no longer race against time, because time isn't your enemy, it's your ally. Every moment lived authentically is worth more than 1,000 achievements driven by habit or social pressure. At this point, many begin to create from a new place. They write, paint, teach, or build, not to impress, but to express what they've discovered within. Because when you find yourself, what you do stops being a strategy for success and becomes a manifestation of your soul. And then, almost without noticing, you start to inspire, not by what you project, but by what you radiate. Your way of being, your presence, your words becomes a mirror for others, because nothing is more contagious than a life lived in truth. So your personal journey becomes a contribution. You're no longer just living for yourself, but showing there's another way to exist, that it is possible to live without self-betrayal, to choose from the soul, to hear the voice of authenticity, even in the noise. And in the end, you understand with clarity, this wasn't about becoming someone else, but coming home to who you were before the fears, the masks, the demands that made you doubt your own light. You realize everything you sought outside, peace, clarity, meaning, was always within. You just needed silence to hear it, courage to allow it, love to hold. Life begins when you stop performing and start inhabiting yourself. When instead of surviving each day, you choose to live it as who you are. When you stop looking outward for validation and start looking inward for connection. Because only there, in that deep bond with your being, does what Jung called individuation bloom, the process of becoming whole, integrating all your parts, turning into who you're meant to be. You don't need all the answers, just the right questions, just the willingness to walk in honesty, just the daring to be you, even when the world insists you be someone else, because your truth, lived with integrity, is already a seed of transformation. And if this message reached you, if something stirred inside as you listened, don't ignore it. It's your soul speaking, that quiet call saying, it's time to release what no longer resonates, time to choose what nourishes, time to stop surviving, and finally start living. Thank you for being here. This wasn't just a video, it was a sacred space where for a few moments, you may have met yourself again. And if that meeting was real, if it touched something within you, then yes, life has just begun. Now you know, life doesn't start when everything is under control or when the world applauds you, or when you reach some imposed goal. Life begins when you choose yourself, when you listen to yourself above the noise, when despite the fear, you take the first step toward who you truly are. That is the real rebirth, not the one that happens outside, but the one ignited within. It needs no witnesses, no titles, just your decision to stop postponing yourself, because deep down, you knew no one was coming to save you. The only one who could rescue you was you, the you who grew tired of pretending, the you who refused to settle, the you who decided you deserved more than a half-lived life. And so you realize, it's not too late, it never was. No matter how long you've been asleep, it's always time to wake up, always time to return to yourself. So now, as you close this chapter and begin a new one, take this with you. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need the willingness to be honest, because honesty with yourself is the greatest act of love. And from there, every step you take will have meaning, even if it's uncertain, because it will be guided not by duty, but authenticity. You are enough, you are worthy, and you deserve a life that reflects what truly lives in your heart. Life begins when you find yourself. That is the starting point. Everything else blossoms from there.